Welcome back to the Shards official podcast. I'm Evan Ross Katz, podcaster and pop culture provocateur. Joining me today are two stars of the show, Kaia Gerber and Graham Campbell. Kaia, it's great to have you back.
So good to see you, Evan.
And Graham, lovely to have you here in New York with me. Now, we've gotten Kaia's history with the show, but Graham, I want to know how this show came to you, because correct me if I'm wrong, but this is your very first TV show.
You're not wrong at all. It's my very, very first TV show.
So how'd this come on your radar?
Yeah, well, Kai and I have known each other, sort of socially, professionally for a little while before. When I saw she was attached to it, I was very excited because I think she's just perfect for it. And I think everyone can agree with that now. I was hankering for an audition after the announcement, and luckily that came through the inbox. And I did many, many auditions for many different roles, so I kind of felt at that point like I was right for the Shards, but we just didn't know exactly where that puzzle piece was going to fit. And then Ryan worked his magic and created the ensemble that you know as, I don't know, what do we call ourselves?
The Shards.
The Shards? I'm looking for something a la the Brat Pack.
The Shardies?
Yeah.
The Sharties. Hard
Shardies,
T.
maybe? So these two have quite an interesting relationship on this show. And so I'm wondering, how would you characterize their relationship at the start of the show?
I mean, I think so much of their relationship was clear in the book and then in our incredible scripts. And Ryan, really used the book as a jumping off point and created these characters because the book is very much Brett's point of view. So it was really fun to work with Ryan and our writers and Graham and I personally to discover what their relationship looked like, what they meant to each other. And I think what was so lovely about it, especially those first few episodes before there starts to be some turmoil, there's like the seeds of resentment maybe, but...
What do you mean turmoil?
I mean, I'm not sure. I don't
But
sort of...
does stuff get... Does it...
Stuff doesn't go amazingly, but it's gonna be okay, I think. But ultimately, the first few episodes, it was so fun because we really got to just be kids with each other. Like, I think that was what was so fun to explore, was this relationship where like we've known each other so long, and Susan and Tom have known each other so long, and just being like super playful. I think we got to a point where I was like, Graham, I think you can't pick me up and carry me out of every single scene. I think we have to sometimes, I have to sometimes walk. And he disagreed and he won that fight. So I'm pretty sure the first few episodes, Susan's legs never carry her out of a scene.
Yeah, I think it's nice because on paper, they're these sort of all-American high school sweethearts, which is cool to kind of tap into that archetype. And I think we had a lot of inspiration to pull from in media for many decades, but especially the early 80s. And then what was even cooler about that is that we got to flip the archetype on its head and kind of watch two people that seemingly have it all devolve into something much more complex and more interesting to play with. So it was nice that we set ourselves up on such a high out the gate to be able to fall as far as we did.
Yes, I definitely agree. Devolve is certainly an apt word here. And I'm wondering for you both, what do you think it is that happens that sort of begins that journey for them? Is it fair to say that Robert's presence in this group is what really begins the unraveling? Or do you think that he spurred what was already inevitable?
Hey, Susan, can I talk to you? You need permission to talk to your boyfriend?
Relax, Tom.
How do you both see it?
There's a lot of back and forth. I know there's discourse about the book too, about whether Robert even exists, because I think he's just sort of like an objective correlative for like what it took to shatter this group of friends, because there's so much insecurity at the end of high school about things you think you're allied with and what you're not. So I think that whether Robert was there or not, these things were going to happen, but he was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back.
I agree with Graham that I think, this friend group is going through a very pivotal time in a young adult's life where you're having to sort of evaluate your friendships and go, are we friends out of situation and convenience, or are these friendships that I'm going to be able to maintain as I go into my adult life and as we separate? And so, yeah, I think Robert really was this sort of, it was kind of like the perfect recipe and the perfect person. He really projects what we project onto him. So I think, like where Susan was feeling insecure in her relationship with Tom, I think Robert just amplified that.
Again, I think what's kind of expert about Robert, the way he's penned and also played by Homer, is that he knows how to kind of tap into everybody's pressure points. And Tom is definitely struggling with insecurity as a man and kind of lack of a male role model in his life.
Really, Graham and Homer have such a great friendship and such a great dynamic and are so funny and sometimes drive me absolutely insane when the two of them get together. Like, I truly cannot stand it, but
Especially
I love
when
them
it's like
so
1
much.
or 2 a.m.
Oh, yeah, when it's 1 or 2 a.m. and Kai's a
Just
little
want to go
grumpy,
home.
then that's when they decide to do a bit.
That's when the bits
And the
come
bit will
out.
go on until 7 a.m. when you wrap.
Yeah.
It was really important for me, and I think it was very evident in the scripts, that Susan really loves Tom. Like, genuinely, genuinely loves him. Even in those moments, you know, when Robert and Tom are fighting, Susan has to go to Tom because that's who she's protective over and that's who she knows, even if Tom maybe is the instigator or the one that started it. And because of how great Homer and Graham's performances were, my reaction to those fight scenes, I was genuinely so scared. I was so freaked out. They felt so violent. And of course, they were always okay. But I love that moment. I think it's in episode 4 where Robert kisses Tom mid-fight. Because how emasculating for Tom in that moment. And it was such a, like, the air just gets sort of like sucked out of the room. Yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but
I personally loved it.
Graham couldn't get enough.
That was more Graham than
The fighting or the kiss? Both.
Tom. Both, but mostly the kiss.
Most of the kiss. Graham, it's interesting because Tom is a really complicated character who's kind of masquerading as a simple one.
Yeah.
How would you describe the journey that we go on with Tom? And would you say that it's spurred by Robert's presence?
I think simple or not, he has the same, if not more, ambition than everybody else. And what was really interesting to play with was how do you demonstrate incredible ambition, incredible want, incredible feelings of betrayal while only having a certain amount of tools to articulate those to the people around you. And just watching someone kind of fall on their face again and again, even if their heart's in the right place, not knowing how to get that point across or get what they want. It's really, he turned into sort of a tragic figure in a way.
That's very well said.
Thank you, Evan.
Okay, so here's one thing I'm really wanting to ask you both. So Susan and Tom both seem relatively unshaken by the gruesome murders occurring in their lives. Brett is obviously incredibly invested and has his theories. However, Susan and Tom don't seem to be experiencing that same fear.
Yeah.
Why do you think these characters feel so safe?
I think that there's an obscene naivete in the two of them and kind of in this group of friends because of this pocket of privilege that they've lived in their whole life where they assume that nothing can or would ever affect them. So it's like, yes, there's horrific violence happening in Los Angeles, but God damn it, I'm going to win Homecoming King. And that's what's important to me.
Yeah.
That was my take on it, is that, yes, there's bad
Yeah.
things happening, but that's not going to affect us in Malibu, you know?
Yeah, I think you can hear about it, but it's very easy to other yourself. Why would that happen to me? And suddenly the proximity gets closer and closer and closer, and our characters are having to sort of reevaluate what they've built this sense of security off of. I also just want to say, I think it was so great working with Graham. And having to say this in front of Graham is hell on earth. So just, Graham, close your ears. But Graham comes from a theater background. And so as the material started getting more intense and, you know, these characters are getting more, thank you for still hiding, Graham, more faced with their own mortality and the horrors kind of get louder and louder. It was great because Graham and I would rehearse so much. I grew up doing theater. And so to have a scene partner like Graham so we could really rehearse these scenes and really find what this meant together, I, in all earnestness, just thought, thank God it's Graham.
Can I say something about that?
You can say whatever you want.
Really?
Yeah.
I love podcasts.
Careful, Evan.
I thought what was so exciting about the process of this show being created is that it was really a living, breathing thing, and we were getting new pages sometimes the night before. And in order to tap into it and try to honor the material in the way that we felt was necessary, I remember like we were sitting there with pens trying to be like, okay, here's this beat, and then but that doesn't make sense because of what happened in episode 2. But what if I tried it this way? And I know it says this, but what if the subtext is this? And she was a really excellent kind of teammate in terms of trying to mine this for all it's worth. And I think I hope to God and to Ryan Murphy that work is
One and the
demonstrated.
same.
Yeah, I hope to God dash Ryan
Comma.
Murphy that is demonstrated in the final product.
I'm wondering, can we reverse course here? Is there
Of
any
course.
praise that you can give to one Kaya Gerber? We'll have her cover her ears.
Yeah, Kaya is the hardest working person maybe I've ever met. At least one of truly the hardest working people I've ever met of anything that she applies herself to. And I think that her want to, I can like tell she's freaking out. But
I'm freaking out. I'm shaking.
To make the absolute most, you did not want to miss a single moment that there was an opportunity to squeeze the juice out of this material, which I think is the tell of a really excellent actor. And I think you see it in the work.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah.
I want to call out one scene because maybe in watching it, like you wouldn't know the sort of what went into it, but I think there's a scene at Robert's party where Tom asks Susan to dance, even though they've had a little bit of a fight earlier. And as scripted, it was just a very simple scene. And then, the character of Tom at the end sort of makes a joke out of it.
Remember the first time we danced?
Of course. You know how drunk we got?
Graham and I had talked a lot about this scene, but when we actually got there, we decided we were kind of like, let's just not look at each other for this. Let's just dance and do it not looking at each other. Because so oftentimes I think as humans, we're saying something, but we're feeling or thinking another. And so to do that scene where we're not looking at each other, it really freed us up to have all the emotions that we had. And it ended up being this really, I think, poignant scene and one of my favorite scenes in the whole show.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because I was going to ask about favorite scenes. So I love that you mentioned that one. Graham, do you have a favorite scene?
Favorite scenes with Kaya is definitely the slow dance in Robert's party.
It wasn't when I rode you like a horse?
That was interesting too. I remember being very dusty, very muddy, and very
And
sweaty.
so hot.
So that wasn't like necessarily my favorite scene.
So sweaty.
I remember being
but
very,
it was
very warm.
Very warm.
Yeah. And I think
But
if
it
you
was-
zoom
it
in,
was
you
good
can see
fun.
just so much sweat on me.
Well,
So,
we'll do a beauty pass on that.
yeah.
When I spoke to Kaya in episode 1, we talked about favorite days on set.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, Graham, do you have a favorite day on set of The Shards?
I have many favorite days for different reasons. I think the most aesthetically pleasing day was when we were shooting the aerial shots of us driving down the PCH in that convertible, because there wasn't a cloud in the sky and we shot pretty much from sunup to sundown and we were blasting music and we got to do most of the driving ourselves. So that was the first time that I was like, oh yeah, Hollywood. Like, it's like, this is what it's always gonna be like. You just feel so cool and so attractive and you get to do all this stuff. So that was a really great day.
Except for the fact that I had to scream Vienna by Ultravox in Graham's
Which
ear,
did ultimately get cut
didn't make it in
from
the show. And
but I
don't
thought it was
know
great.
why.
I thought it was great. And maybe there'll be like a gag reel of all of our.
I was like, Graham, please sing with me. And he's like, no, Tom wouldn't be singing right now. And I was like, oh, that's nice one.
You can always blame it on the character. I don't think Tom would. I don't think Tom would do
would
that.
not
right
sing.
When
I
in
was
doubt,
like, oh,
Yeah.
just play the character.
Yeah. Yeah.
nice.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been a real thrill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Evan.
I look forward to, like the rest of the audience, finding out how this is going to end ...
And then maybe eventually we'll find out who the trawler is.
Maybe
Yeah.
so. Won't that be the day?
I have my theories. I think it's Evan Rosskatz.
You think it's me?
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to do this podcast, so that
Yeah.
I could be the big reveal at the end.
Yeah.
But we'll save that for episode 9. That's all for this time. Next week, I'll be joined by production designer Kat Smith to talk about pools, props, and of course, Hamburger Hamlet. Be sure to rate, review, and follow The Shard's official podcast. You can check it out on Hulu or wherever you get your podcasts. And watch new episodes of The Shards on FX and Hulu. I'm Evan Ross Katz, and I'll see you next time.